For the first time all season, the Baltimore Orioles have completed a 3-game sweep with a 2-1 win over the Texas Rangers. I'll recap that. Plus, the Orioles have a new player they claimed off of waivers. Left-hander Kirk McCarty coming over from Cleveland. We'll learn more about him and what the corresponding roster moves were for the Orioles coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Thursday, July 7th, 2022, and welcome back in to the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb, and coming up on today's episode, we're going to start by recapping another Orioles victory as the O's win it 2-1 over the Rangers on Wednesday night and complete a 3-game sweep, their first sweep of the year, and a 4-game winning streak now for the Orioles. I'll get to the 5 things you need to know from that victory. Plus, we'll get into the Orioles' latest roster move, claiming left-handed pitcher Kirk McCarty from the Cleveland Guardians. We'll talk about what he could bring to the O's, why he's in Norfolk to start, and which roster moves the Orioles also made on Wednesday, not only to make room for McCarty with a DFA, but also switched up a member of their bullpen as well. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast. But before we get there, just got to thank you for making Locked On Orioles your first podcast listen of the day. We're free and available on all podcast listening platforms. And if you listen on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, if you can leave a 5-star rating and a review for the podcast on those apps, it really helps out a lot. And of course, we're here on YouTube as well. Make sure to subscribe to the Locked On Orioles YouTube page, creeping up on 600 subscribers, trying to get there in the next couple of days, and I need your help. Also, comment on the videos as well, like the videos, and especially if you go back and watch Wednesday's episode where, obviously I recapped the Orioles' crazy walk-off win from Tuesday night, but also did a mid-season Orioles award show. Go back to that one, get in the comments, let me know who you think should have won the awards I gave out, what I got right, what I got wrong, right here on the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel. But again, we thank you for making Locked On Orioles your first podcast listen of the day. And for your first listen today, we start with Orioles and Rangers. O's 2, Rangers 1, as the Orioles complete the sweep over Texas on Wednesday night. 3 one-run wins for the O's in this series, but they all count the same as they sweep Texas out of Baltimore and leapfrog Texas in the AL wildcard standings. Yeah, the Orioles are still just kind of hanging around at 6 games out of the wild card. Just saying. But I'm going to get you the 5 things you need to know from the Orioles 2-1 win over the Texas Rangers that made it 4 in a row for the Birds and gets them to 39-44 on the season. First thing you need to know, well, let's start with what I just watched. Jorge Lopez is mostly back to his old ways, as Brandon Hyde did what I didn't think he was going to do. I said this on the podcast on Tuesday after Jorge Lopez gave up another home run in Monday's outing. I thought Brandon Hyde would for sure give him at least, no doubt, 2 days off and maybe 3 days off from pitching. Now, Lopez was not used Tuesday night in a save situation. Whether he was blowing saves or not, he just needed a rest that night. But I thought the Orioles were not going to turn to him on Wednesday night as well, except they did. Brian Baker got 2 outs out of the bullpen. Cionel Perez gets 2 outs out of the bullpen. And with all the lefties coming up in the 9th inning for Texas, even though Nathaniel Lowe, the leadoff guy, is actually a reverse splits guy, hits lefties better, Perez hadn't thrown many pitches in the 8th. I thought for sure Cionel Perez with the lefties was just going to pitch the 9th and try to get a 5-out save for the Orioles. But Jorge Lopez starts warming up in the bottom of the 8th inning, and I'm thinking, wow, they gave him 1 day off, and he's right back on it. What does he do? He locks down the save. And started with a ground out that he gives up a single. Then he strikes out Cole Calhoun on a really well-framed high curveball. Nice job by Adley Rutschman. And then, of course, he struck out Brad Miller on a disgusting changeup down and away to finish the game. 2 strikeouts in the inning for Jorge. Now, we all know what happened the pitch before the strikeout. He was ahead of Brad Miller 0-2, throws a fastball down the middle, and Miller crushes it into the seats in right field. Fortunately, he hits it about 5 feet to the right of the flagpole, making it a foul ball. And instead of a go-ahead 2-run homer and the 4th straight game with a home run allowed for Jorge Lopez, it's just a foul ball that keeps the count 0-2. And then he makes a great pitch the very next one and strikes him out. So yes, my heart did leap out of my chest when that ball was in the air down the line. But he recovered in 2 different ways. He recovered in the outing in total to get the save and get back on the good path. And he recovered after almost giving up the homer the very next pitch, getting the strikeout. Jorge Lopez, just a little bit of a bad stretch. He should be back. Second thing you need to know, 2 words. Spenser Watkins. Are you kidding me? Spenser Watkins. He goes 6 2/3 innings in this start, allowing just 1 run on 4 hits, strikes out 3 and walks 1, and threw just 84 pitches, lowering his ERA to 4.15 on the season. Now, Texas squared him up a little bit with 8 hard hit balls against Watkins on the night, but his pitch count got a little up in the 6th and 7th innings, especially in the 6th. He had a long plate appearance where he ended up issuing his only walk of the game with 1 out in the 7th. But Spenser Watkins' plan essentially on the day was just drop in some curveballs, and guys were either taking them for called strikes or swinging at them and popping them up. It seemed like that's what happened with pretty much every batter, and that's why Watkins' pitch count was so far down. He pitched 6 2/3 and only threw 84 pitches. It takes a lot of guys in baseball 84 pitches to get through 5 innings, and Watkins did it in 6 2/3. If this wasn't a 2-1 game, Watkins might have pitched 7 or maybe 8. Brandon Hyde obviously wanted to go to his bullpen, goes to Brian Baker to get that final out of the 7th, goes to Perez and then Lopez because it remained a 2-1 game the entire time. But if that game's not as close, Watkins continues to roll. And he threw, 46% four-seamers, 31% cutters. And he threw 11 curveballs, but it seemed like every time he threw that curveball, he dropped it in for a strike or it was popped up. And the cutter was, again, not his best pitch, but it was okay. The fastball, again, was a Spenser Watkins fastball. Velo was a little down, but it was okay. But the curveball and the slider, he only threw him a combined 17 times out of his 84 pitches, but they basically got him all his outs. And he only had 9 whiffs on 49 swings, but you don't need that many whiffs when guys are just weak contact, pop-ups, and you're just rolling through innings. I'll take that every time, Spenser Watkins. No Means, no Gray Rod, no Bradish, no Zimmerman. Spenser Watkins says, no problem for me. Third thing you need to know from this one is that, he did it in a little bit of a different way, but Ryan McKenna got the big hit for the Orioles again. Now, his go-ahead home run on Tuesday night didn't exactly end up being the biggest hit. It gave the O's an 8-7 lead in the 8th, but of course they blew that lead in the 9th inning. Rougned Odor and Cedric Mullins had to play hero after that, but the only 2 runs that the Orioles scored in this game came in the 2nd inning and came off a single from Ryan McKenna. Came up with runners on 2nd and 3rd and 2 down and hits a slow roller to shortstop, and he would have beat out the play anyway, so it would have been an RBI infield single to make it 1-0, but Corey Seager barehands it and throws the ball away from the first baseman. The second run comes around to score on the error, and the O's take a 2-0 lead in the 2nd inning, and McKenna, had a 1-for-3 with that infield single. Also had 2 strikeouts, but he did get the only RBI of the night for the Orioles and didn't hit the ball hard at all, but used his speed and got the O's their 2 runs. All right, Ryan McKenna. Fourth thing you need to know from this one is that, the rest of the Oriole offense, and even really McKenna as well, didn't really show up in this one. Kind of lucky to get away with a win. Just 2 runs on 4 hits for the Orioles in this game. Now, they did draw 4 walks, which was solid, but they only had 5 hard hit balls on the night. Nobody had a multi-hit game. The 4 hits were all singles. Nobody had an extra base hit in this game. Singles from Mancini, Rutschman, Urias, and McKenna. Now, Adley Rutschman did have 2 hard hit balls. Mancini had 2 hard hit balls, and Cedric Mullins had a hard hit ball and a walk despite an 0-for-3 night from the leadoff spot. But at the end of the day, the Orioles escaped with basically doing nothing on offense against Glenn Otto, who's not a great starter, Brock Burke, and then 2 innings of Jose Leclerc. That was the Rangers pitching on Wednesday night. The O's didn't really get to him, and at the end of the day, the O's just pitched better and won the game. But, it was a weird series. It was a weird series. 10 runs. 1 run. What are you going to do? They swept. Doesn't matter what the scores were. Orioles got the sweep. And that's the fifth and final thing you need to know. This is the Orioles' first 3-game sweep since July of 2021, when they swept the Washington Nationals and basically swept the Nats into selling at last year's deadline. Despite so much more success this year, the Orioles don't have a sweep. They swept the Nats. They swept the Astros in Houston last year, which was still maybe the weirdest series of all time. But they get their first sweep in almost a year. 4 wins in a row, including the final game in Minnesota, ties their winning streak, season-high winning streak of 4. And if Jorge Lopez doesn't blow back-to-back saves, if other things don't happen. But remember, the O's had the lead in the 9th on Friday and Saturday. This could easily be a 6-game winning streak. The Orioles continue to play well. They're back to just 5 games under 500. They're 6 games out of the wild card. They got the Angels up next, who, despite having Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout, can't seem to beat anybody, and the Orioles have 4 games against the Angels at home. Who says they can't get to 500 at some point? That could truly happen. But just another different kind of win, but a fun win for the Orioles as they win it 2-1 and sweep the Rangers right back to Texas. But for the O's, it was a busy day on the field Wednesday night. Also a busy day off the field as 4 roster moves were made for the Orioles on Wednesday, with the biggest one being another waiver claim as they picked up left-handed pitcher Kirk McCarty from the Cleveland Guardians. And I got to say, I watch a whole lot of Major League Baseball, not just the Orioles. And I was very unfamiliar with Kirk McCarty, but did my research and we'll let you know who Kirk McCarty is and how he could potentially help the Orioles here coming up next. But first, I want to talk to you about BlueNile.com, because whether you're ready to pop the question and need the perfect ring, or you're just celebrating a moment and you need a piece of fine jewelry that's unique as your partner, head to BlueNile.com. Because if you don't know what kind of diamond you need, what size ring you need, what size diamond, what the best piece is, Blue Nile has simple online tools to let you choose the shape, size, clarity, setting, style, everything. And there's jewelry experts on hand 24/7, available via phone or chat to help you find that memorable gift at every single budget. So make your moments sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com. And Locked On Orioles listeners get $50 off purchases of $500 or more. This podcast exclusive includes engagement. Use the code Locked On. That's code Locked On. Plus, every order is insured, ships free, and arrives in discreet packaging that won't give away what's inside. Shop stress-free and find your forever piece. Go to BlueNile.com today. So the Orioles beat the Rangers 2-1 on Wednesday night to complete the sweep, but that's not all they did on Wednesday. Made some roster moves as well, and one of them was making a waiver claim, and that claim was left-handed pitcher Kirk McCarty, who the Orioles claimed off waivers from the Cleveland Guardians. McCarty, a 26-year-old left-handed pitcher out of Hattiesburg, Mississippi, who was a 7th-round pick of Cleveland back in the 2017 draft out of Southern Miss. He was actually recalled to the big leagues by Cleveland on July 2nd, started the game on July 2nd, and then was DFA'd on July 3rd. And 3 days later, the Orioles claim him. Now, he hasn't gotten much Major League time. In fact, he made his Major League debut this year on the mound for Cleveland on April 24th. And he made 3 appearances in the big leagues this year, spent most of the season at AAA. Now, in his 3 appearances, 2 starts, 1 relief appearance, he threw 12 innings and had a 9.00 ERA. 12 innings, 18 hits, 12 earned runs, 8 Ks, 6 walks, and 6 home runs allowed. Yeah, not great stats. Now, the start that was his last for Cleveland right before he got DFA'd, he pitched against the Yankees. That was on Saturday. 5 innings, 4 runs, 6 hits, 3 Ks, 4 walks, and a home run. And his 2 other appearances, he had a June 7th start against the Texas Rangers, 4 innings, 4 earned runs, 8 hits, 2 Ks, no walks, and 3 homers. And then he also had an April 24th relief appearance in New York, which was his Major League debut. 3 innings, 4 runs, 4 hits, 3 Ks, 2 walks, and 2 home runs. That's his whole Major League career. Those 3 games right there, those 12 innings. You can't really take away too much from 12 big league innings. What we do know is he has a little bit of a home run problem, as you can see from 6 home runs allowed in 12 big league innings. And it's not just in the big leagues. I mean, he allowed 8 home runs in 43 AAA innings this year, which isn't nearly as bad of a rate, obviously, but still, you would like to allow a little bit less than 8 homers in 43 innings. That home run rate is not good. And really, 1.2 run home runs per nine in his minor league career since 2017 with Cleveland. You'd like that number to be a little closer to 1 or even below. But I tried to do my best to find why the Orioles wanted to give a 40-man roster spot to Kirk McCarty, because they DFA'd Marcos Diplán to open up space, which I'll talk about in just a second. But for McCarty, the AAA numbers are certainly better. 11 appearances, 8 starts with AAA Columbus in the Cleveland system this year, 3.77 ERA. In 43 innings, he allowed 47 hits, struck out 34 batters and walked 13. Again, the 8 home runs and a 283 batting average against him. So nothing still really jumps off the page. He also spent the entirety of 2021 in AAA. Remember, he's 26 years old already. 2021, 24 starts at the AAA level for Cleveland, a 5.01 ERA in 124 innings, about 8.5 hits per nine, 7.6 Ks per nine, and 3.2 walks per nine in his AAA season in 2021. So we're not talking about strikeout numbers that jump off the page either. And he's 26 years old and he's made 3 big league appearances. But the Orioles obviously see something. And I kind of feel like I felt about Chris Vallimont. Now, that was for a different reason. Vallimont had these gaudy strikeout numbers, but was walking everybody and had never pitched above Double-A. So you questioned that waiver claim to give him a 40-man roster spot. Well, Vallimont tore up Double-A in Bowie, now is pitching well in Norfolk, and is probably going to be in the big leagues this year. So that one worked out. Austin Voth's numbers were horrendous for the Nationals when the Orioles claimed him. I'll take what Austin Voth has given the Orioles so far this year. Now, he had more of a track record in the bigs, obviously, back when he was a starter with the Nats, but still. So I want to give them a little leeway on Kirk McCarty and try to find, what they're looking for here. So, just over 400 minor league innings, a 4.35 career minor league ERA, about 9 Ks and 3 walks per nine in that stretch. Now, the Orioles did immediately option him to AAA Norfolk after the claim. So he wasn't put on the active roster. He'll pitch in AAA a little bit before the O's, you would assume, call him up at some point. But here's what he's got. He throws a lot of pitches. He is a 5-pitch pitcher. Now, StatCast actually says he has 6 pitches, but they registered him with 1 sinker in his 12 innings. That's probably just a StatCast mishap. So he's a 5-pitch guy. 4-seam fastball is his main pitch, about 40% of the time, 92 miles an hour. Now, the one stat that jumps off the page a little bit for Kirk McCarty, 32% whiff rate on his 4-seamer. Now, that's just in the big leagues, and that, of course, is just over 12 innings. But it's a pretty good whiff rate on a 92-mile-per-hour fastball. So maybe that's what the O's are looking at. It's got a fairly high spin rate. He throws it up in the zone a lot. That's where most of his fastballs were located at the big league level. And a 32% whiff rate, you'll take that. So maybe the O's are looking at kind of keying in on that 4-seam fastball. Now, his number 2 pitch is the slider. Those at about 20% of the time. At an 85, 86 mile per hour pitch. 214 batting average against it. That's been kind of his go-to number 2 pitch. He throws a changeup 18% of the time. 84, 85 on the changeup. He threw 36 changeups in his 12 big league innings. All of them were thrown to right-handed batters. That is the pitch he uses to try and get righties out. Basically never throws that pitch to lefties. Then he's got a curveball about 13% of the time. Kind of a big overhand looping curveball, 76 miles an hour. That pitch has got some solid data. That is a 33% whiff rate, and opponents hit only 167 against that curveball, so that's something to look at. And then he tosses a cutter in there 8% of the time, but an 88 mile per hour cutter, nothing to that. The O's may just have him get rid of that cutter. We'll see. But I can see the Orioles taking a look and saying, you're going to go 4-seamer, slider, curveball, and play that 4-seamer up in the zone and drop those breaking pitches, below the strike zone and see what you can do. And this is another kind of project similar to Voth or Vallimont, but the Orioles clearly see something, and I think it might be in that 4-seam fastball if I had to guess. But hopefully there's something there. He had success at times, in Double-A with Cleveland, and even, for good stretches in Triple-A this year with Cleveland, he had success. But there's a home run problem. It helps that the Orioles' Camden Yards is now a pitcher-friendly ballpark. Maybe if you get the home runs down, all the other numbers get better. That usually happens. But again, interesting move. We'll see if it works out. But obviously the Orioles had to DFA someone off a full 40-man roster to make room for Kirk McCarty. And that move was Marcos Diplán. And coming up next, we'll talk about why Diplán was the choice for Mike Elias and the Orioles. plus the other move the Orioles made in the bullpen, optioning one of their relievers and calling up another guy before Wednesday's game. But first, let's talk about betonline.net, your number one spot, your number one place for all your sports betting needs. You get the lines, you get the injury news, you can listen to podcasts for all things Major League Baseball, but also MMA, boxing, and golf throughout the summer. They've got you covered for all your sports wagering information, live betting, esports, scores, and much, much more. And betonline.net, it's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events all summer long. So if you're a sports gambler, you need to head to betonline.net. It's the number one source for all your betting needs. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action at betonline.net, where the game starts. So the Orioles with a roster move on Wednesday, claiming left-handed pitcher Kirk McCarty off waivers from the Cleveland Guardians, but they had a full 40-man roster, so they had to make a move, and there were a couple of guys who certainly could have gotten the DFA. Richie Martin is one of those guys. Travis Lakins obviously could have been one of those guys. But Marcos Diplán, to a little bit of surprise, was the guy who got DFA'd. Now, Diplán has been DFA'd before. The Orioles actually outrighted him off the 40-man roster last offseason. He went unclaimed. He stayed in the Orioles organization. And he's actually pitched in the bigs a little bit this year. He's made 5 appearances with the Orioles out of the big league bullpen this season. 5 2/3 innings, 1 run, 4 hits, 8 Ks, and 5 walks in the majors this year. Of course, we saw a lot more of Marcos Diplán last year, made his major league debut in the second half of the season after he super randomly represented the Orioles in the Futures game at All-Star Weekend last year. That is still weird. It was cool for him, but just odd. But he threw 30 innings out of the Oriole bullpen last year, had a 4.50 ERA, about 7 strikeouts per 9, but 4.5 walks per 9. And that's been the problem for Marcos Diplán. You know, I said the stuff is better than okay. It plays at the major league level. He's got a fastball with some life and a changeup and an interesting slider. But for the walk rate that he has, which, is over 4 walks per 9 and even worse at times, he just doesn't have the strikeout rate that you need to go along with that, especially in his big league time. He struck out some guys in AAA, like his AAA numbers this year in Norfolk. 17 appearances. He's got a 2.28 ERA. In 23 2/3 innings, 19 hits, 23 Ks, but 15 walks. Now, only 2 home runs, and he has a really low BABIP, so it helps him out. And in the big leagues, he really hasn't struck out a lot of guys. So, he's used more soft contact. I just think at the end of the day, for a guy that doesn't have big-time stuff, strikeout stuff, yeah, the ERA is low, but when your walk rate is that high, I mean, obviously a big reason why he hasn't been up as much as he could have been in the Oriole bullpen this year is because the bullpen's been so much better, so many more established guys in the pen. But your walk rate can't be that high if you're not striking guys out at a much higher clip. And so that's kind of been the issue. Diplán can choose to become a free agent if he does not get claimed off waivers. We will see. I hope he stays in the organization because at the very least, he is good bullpen depth to have at AAA. He's kind of been the Orioles' go-to guy when they need, a little help in the bullpen here and there over the last 2 years. So I would love for him to stay in the organization, but I understand why he was the DFA. That walk rate is just way too high. And there's other guys who the Orioles would call on from AAA to help the bullpen, I think, ahead of Diplán at this point, even with a 2.28 ERA, just too many walks at this point. And of course, one of those guys that the Orioles called on before Diplán, literally on Wednesday, was Beau Sulser, who got the call back up to the big leagues with the Orioles. If you remember, back in May, the Orioles claimed Sulser off waivers from the Pittsburgh Pirates, the right-hander who is, of course, the brother of former Orioles right-hander Cole Sulser. And Beau made 1 appearance with the Orioles in the big leagues. Through 3 innings of mop-up relief, allowed 2 runs on 7 hits, no Ks, no walks in his 1 appearance. Went back down to AAA, and he's been fairly impressive in AAA. Now, it's only been 7 appearances, 1 start. But in 19 2/3 innings, he's got a 3.20 ERA. He's allowed 20 hits, but he struck out 19. He's only walked 5, and he's only allowed 1 home run since he's gotten to Norfolk. So the numbers have been good. He's similar to Cole Sulser, throws the fastball up in the zone and has a wicked, kind of fall off the table split changeup, just like his brother Cole throws. And he's basically back in the bullpen to provide some length. The Orioles don't exactly have a long man right now in their bullpen. I mean, you have Keegan Aiken, but he's not really a mop-up guy. Use him in bigger spots. And with all the taxing on the bullpen from Monday and Tuesday's games in this series, the Orioles needed a guy who could give them length if Spenser Watkins got hit around early. Now, obviously, he threw his longest start of his career in 6 2/3 innings, but the Orioles felt like they needed a pitcher, a guy that could provide length, and Beau Sulser does that. And obviously, he didn't pitch Wednesday night, but he'll, I'm assuming, stick around for a few more days if the O's need a long guy or even a mop-up spot. But you had to send a reliever down to make that move, and the Orioles demoted Nick Vespi, the left-hander, back down to AAA. Now, this move, obviously, not my favorite, as there go the notes. There go the notes. Down they go. We're leaving that in. You're getting the full podcast experience right here. But Nick Vespi, I like his stuff, and it stinks to see him back down in AAA. But what I will say is, obviously, if you watch the last 3 appearances, they haven't been great. You know, the one in Seattle, after he had gone, 10 appearances without giving up a run, he gives up 6 runs in a third of an inning. Then he gets 4 outs on Monday without allowing a run. But he comes in and gives up the big 3-run homer on Tuesday night, the 8th inning, to Nathaniel Lowe, that at that point tied Tuesday's game at 7. And his stuff just hasn't been as crisp. He obviously has options, and maybe, he could have used a few days to reset in AAA. And the tough part with Vespi is he's clearly too good for AAA. I mean, did not allow an earned run all year in AAA before the O's finally called him up. But he's going back down to the minors again. And unfortunately, unless there's an injury at the big league level, the Orioles have to keep Vespi down in AAA for 15 days before they can recall him. And the O's are probably going to need another reliever before then. So we'll probably see at some point a guy like Logan Gillespie maybe replace potentially Beau Sulser at some point, or, maybe hopefully soon Bruce Zimmerman is ready to come back, so he'll replace Beau Sulser. But you won't see Vespi for 2 weeks. Hopefully at the end of that 15 days, Vespi is right back in the big league bullpen. It stinks to see him go down, just kind of going through a little bit of a rough stretch. And that happens to rookies. Happens to rookies all the time. But he will be certainly, as will Logan Gillespie and others, be back in the big leagues with the Orioles at some point this year. But even without Vespi, the O's win it 2-1 on Wednesday night and sweep the Rangers. And next up, the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim come into Camden Yards for a 4-game series starting tonight. And you want to know how lucky the Orioles are? Wednesday night, guess who pitched in Miami? Shohei Ohtani. You know what that means? The O's play the Angels for 4 games, and they won't have to face Shohei Ohtani. Sounds pretty good to me. The O's have already taken 2 out of 3 in Anaheim earlier this year on the road against the Angels. This Angels team is just falling apart. They have a worse record than the Orioles. They have Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani. Both are playing incredibly well, and they can't figure out how to win ball games. It's wild to watch. But a struggling Angels team is coming in for 4 games starting tonight. And on the podcast, I'll be back with you tomorrow for one final episode this week. I'll recap game 1 between the Orioles and the Angels, get you the 5 things you need to know from that one. And then we're going to be joined by Eric Garfield, who hasn't been on the podcast in a while, but he is going to come back on the pod to talk Orioles low minor leagues. We'll talk about the guys in the FCL who have been impressing so far. We'll talk about his week-long trip to Delmarva he made a couple of weeks ago and who impressed him with the Shorebirds, some of the guys who have been promoted from the FCL up higher, and just a general talk about the Orioles organization in general, because as Adley Rutschman graduated from prospect status on Tuesday, Gunnar Henderson on the new MLB.com Pipeline Top 100, Gunnar Henderson jumped from number 41 to number 5 on their prospect rankings. They have Grayson Rodriguez number 4 and Gunnar Henderson number 5. Also, Jordan Westberg entered the top 100, so the O's still have 5 top 100 guys. And oh yeah, if you missed it, DL Hall pitched 6 innings and struck out a career-high 14 batters. 14 batters. He got 35 whiffs in 6 innings in the best start of his career Wednesday afternoon in Norfolk. We'll talk a little bit about him too, because I think he's ready for the big leagues. But that's all coming up with Eric Garfield on tomorrow's episode. Until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.